Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Another disaster for this Miami Hurricanes defense. We're going to get into that. And I think that's the main talking point coming out of this football game is it's hard to see changes not being made for this Miami Hurricanes defense. But I want to start with the amount of junk that I'm seeing on Twitter about Cam Ward, quote unquote, quitting at halftime. I guarantee you that was a conversation that Cam Ward had with Mario Cristobal saying, hey, we know you're moving on to the NFL. We want to give Emory a chance to show what he can do in the second half. Cam Ward did everything possible to win football games for this Miami Hurricanes team. You got people, Adam Gormley, the director of scouting and recruiting for rivals, Mario Cristobal deserves zero blame for Miami's loss. Imagine having your star quarterback quit at halftime. Just stay out of bowl prep entirely if you're going to pull that garbage. And that was not the only one I saw. Absolute insane takes going off on Twitter. Cam Ward's like the only quarterback that's getting that treatment. Wanted to get that off my chest. I know Cam Ward certainly did not quit on this team, and you didn't see, very, very engaged in that second half supporting Emory Williams. To me, some people just are so comfortable, firing off those takes with just not knowing the situation. That's extremely frustrating. Claps, hey, good for Cam Ward. He diced up one of the best passing defenses we saw in the country in Iowa State. Cam Ward made himself money in the first half. We've seen Cam Ward play a lot of good football. That might have been his best football we've seen all year, and give a lot of credit to what Cam Ward brought to this Miami Hurricanes team. With that aside, though, we got to dig into this defense. Now, before we do, as always, to the Miami Hurricane fans, a lot of y'all have been rocking with the boys a long time, the highs, the lows. Can't thank you guys enough. Would love for y'all to sound off in the comment section as well. You guys can tell, normally I like to talk about the positives, and there are some positives that we're going to talk about, but you got to address the elephant in the room when there is one. And this Miami Hurricanes defense is certainly the topic of discussion heading into the offseason. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, I guess I'll give you the tee box, and then I'm just going to read my notes from the football game on this defense, but I'll give you the tee box first. Let's start with this Hurricanes defense. How are we feeling about it?
It's the same story as you've pretty much seen all year. Their inability to cover in the back end and communicate and be sound fundamentally there. It's been really frustrating all year. And again, it's not about necessarily the exact play, but the fact that it's gotten no better, it feels like pretty much from start to finish, is the real problem I see, and why I'd be really surprised if there weren't some major shakeups on this.
In fact, I think it's gotten worse as the season's gone on. The best performance from this defense was week 1 against Florida, and ever since then, it's been just downhill every single week, and they're not addressing the things that need to be addressed. Now, if I'm going to read off my notes, it starts with, it's a disaster. We're just throwing things at the wall and hoping it sticks. At one point, we're playing cover 0, and at another point, we're rushing 3, dropping 8. There's no identity. There's no coverage that this Hurricanes team can go to that they feel comfortable doing. If you want to play zone coverage, this team in their spacing is just not right. The communication at the back end's a disaster. If they want to play man coverage, they don't have the guys to win one-on-one matchups.
They don't play the football in the air. When it's in the air,
that's also a problem.
Is not towards the ball. They're not making plays. They're taking penalties. And again, it's been that way all year. And the fact that they haven't made any progress on kind of fixing those issues that anybody watching this team can see, it's very.
I want to know what's the most frustrating is that you had 3 weeks to prepare. You knew who you were playing 3 weeks ago. You had 15 practices to know what Iowa State wants to do on offense. Every single time that Iowa State sent a player in motion, it was a complete meltdown from the secondary. There's a difference between communicating your assignments and just utter panic. It was utter panic almost every time. If you are an opposing offensive coordinator, just run some pre-snap motion. Miami does not know how to handle it, and go run your play and be successful. That's kind of all you have to do. Tackling space, clearly a problem. Red zone defense stunk. You didn't stop him one time in the red zone, didn't force a field goal one time. That's all you need to do to win a lot of football games for this Miami Hurricanes team. When you have an offense that Miami has, if you just bull your backs in the red zone, chances are you win a lot of football games. They weren't able to do that as well. let's start with the defensive line. This defensive line is disruptive, Dill, and that's what frustrates me the most. I think a lot of those guys are going to be NFL draft picks at some point during their career. I feel like the sum of the parts is not as good as like the individual players. Gap integrity. I mean, I remember on a Friday night, we were talking about this Virginia Tech Miami game, and the same problems where, hey, we're being disruptive, but we're not keeping the quarterback in the pocket. Those problems continue at the linebacker spot. Our eyes are getting lost, and you're missing tackles in space. And in the secondary, we knew, we knew that the personnel wasn't good. Yeah, we knew that heading in. We had question marks there, but it hasn't gotten much better. And it certainly is way worse than we thought. Dill, in your mind, I mean, you're Mario Cristobal, and look, many of the Miami Hurricane fans who've rocked with the fellas for a while know I don't get up here and call for guys' jobs. It's not my guess style of doing it. You have to take a long look at this program and say what's best for it, and do we need to make a change on the defensive side of the football?
No, this would feel very Alex Grinch-like to me with USC, where I think
Yeah,
everybody nationally knew it's like, okay, you can't play this style of defense. Not everything can't be really easy. And again, if I felt like Iowa State was just making a ton of plays, fine, that'll happen in a game here and there. But this is game in and game out. It doesn't matter who they play. It doesn't matter how good the competition is.
yeah.
Their defense struggles with the same thing. So at the end of the day, if they don't make a change at that D coordinator spot, and I'd be really, really surprised because that's just like that's not taken seriously enough. If you're
Yeah,
Miami, you've built the roster that you look like this roster should be going and competing with everyone. You had the best quarterback in the country. You had an unbelievable offensive line, unbelievable
had the
run.
best offense in the country, period. There's not an offense I'm taking over the Miami Hurricanes.
And when your defense is that bad that you can't even be competitive to an extent at the national level, like that's a really, really big problem in my eyes.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's not the
Look,
talent necessarily. Like they've recruited again, they were going to be young. You knew that was going to be the case, but man, you got to make some
yeah,
progress.
this is not me getting up here and like expunging the players, because the players got to go out and make plays. And when the football is in the air, you got to play it. And when you have an opportunity to make a tackle in space, you got to make it. The coaches can't tackle for you, but what coaches can do is put you in spots where you can be successful or have the best chance at being successful. And it's hard to argue that that's happening for this Miami Hurricanes program. Now, while we're on the negatives, real quick, the Mario Cristobal clock management, it was a little bit of an issue again. Iowa State's inside the 3. You almost know they're going to score. Your defense hasn't stopped them all game. And they run the football. The clock's winding inside of 2 minutes, and we don't use a timeout. And you get the ball back. You could have gotten the ball back with 1:30. And you get the ball back with less than a minute. There's a couple things that you're looking at and say it needs to clean up if this team wants to compete if this team wants to compete where their roster is. This is a roster that can compete for national championships, but you got to clean a lot of things up going into 2025. Offensive side of the football, Cam Ward was awesome. And I was, again, happy that we got, and I think a lot of Miami Hurricane fans were too, that you got to see Emory Williams. Now, you didn't get to see a ton of them until the last drive of the football game, because Miami's rushing attack was phenomenal. So if we're starting with positives, Dill, the recipe for next year. Look, you're not going to have a Cam Ward at quarterback unless a guy like Quinn Ewers hits the transfer portal. You probably know you're not going to have a Cam Ward at quarterback. That does not mean this offense will be bad. Even if it's Emory Williams, who I wouldn't say was bad today, but certainly didn't inspire a ton of confidence, I think is probably fair saying too. This offensive line, I mean, Markel Bell, I think will be an all-ACC guy next year. You feel, and that's Cooper is a road grader in the run game. We know what Maui Noah is. The recipe was there. We are going to run the football next year. We're going to control the time possession. Hopefully this defense gets better. Dill, there were some things that you really liked from this Miami Hurricanes offense during this football
Again, that's like the thing. Like Mario Cristobal, I know, and I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of talk about him and his job status and whether he's gonna be on the hot seat a little bit heading into next year. I genuinely don't believe that. If he doesn't make a change at the D coordinator spot, my defense of him will probably get a little less loud because that will feel like a somewhat unserious move. But he's built a team in terms of talent and physicality and toughness, especially along the lines of scrimmage, that I mean, you love that's what he got brought into Miami to do, bring back, be the most physical team on the field for the most part on both sides. He's doing that. I think he's done his part. He's gotten a lot of really good players into this team. I think Shannon
you
Dawson was a big time hire. But like, so they're moving in the right direction. But yeah,
So do you think I agree. I agree with you. I'm not trying to ignore that. I think Damian Martinez comes back. I could see him going to the NFL draft. But man, the way he looked the last 6 weeks of the season, the way he looked tonight against Iowa State, there was nobody harder on Damian Martinez than I was the first 6 weeks of the season. Like, I just didn't think it was the Damian Martinez we saw at Oregon State. The last 6 weeks, he's been one of the best backs in the country.
and look, running backs at the college level, I would say, are probably more valuable than they are at the pro level. Like, do I think he'll be a really high draft pick?
No.
Does the style exactly fit? I feel like with the
Well, here's my question is, if you come back and do that for 12 weeks, like, you might be one of the highest running backs taken. Now, I think still he'll be a high running back taken if he decides to declare. And let's make no mistake about it. If he does go to the draft, I feel very confident in Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle next year. I don't think that would be a disaster. Just was kind of throwing it out there because you kind of know that this is what that offense is going to look like next year. All right, Emory Williams, I want to ask you about it. From what you saw from him, and again, it was one half. He got a couple balls batted down, was put in a bad spot, obviously, with one timeout, less than a minute left to go try to win a game. What are your feelings about Emory Williams as the quarterback one in 2025?
I mean, I'd still be very surprised if they don't go into the portal and get somebody because I just look, it's not a hyper competitive room at this exact moment. I don't think it's like you haven't seen Emory Williams play any great football at the college football level. Again, when you're the backup all year and you get thrown into a second half, I don't exactly expect it to like look like Cam Ward's out there and you don't really miss a beat. Like that's
And it's worth mentioning that Iowa State defense is a top 5 unit against the pass in the country. Like, Cam Ward made it look easy because he's a special dude. It's a really good defense, especially in the secondary.
and obviously these coaches know more than me, but I look like it didn't look wildly comfortable for him. He was holding the ball, it did feel like, for a little bit longer than I would have wanted to see. He's not necessarily the athlete that some of these other quarterbacks are. So be a little bit surprised, frankly, if they really only go into it with him as the only like viable option, it feels like, because I don't know what behind him you really think like, oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah, it'd be Judd Anderson, Luke Nickel. I love Luke Nickel. I think
Luke
he's
Nickel's a fun freshman, but like he is a freshman.
yeah, 100%. I wonder if there's an element of like, we don't love the quarterbacks right now because Miami didn't really make any serious inquiries at the quarterback spot. You heard some like I think that was just the media putting out Miami's going to be interested because they got Cam Ward last year. It never seemed like Miami seriously pursued a quarterback out of the transfer portal. So maybe that does tell you Mario Cristobal, Shannon Dawson, this offensive staff have a lot of confidence in Emory Williams. Because I guess I should prerequisite that they did make a move for one guy. And that was John Mateer. I think that what tells me about that is if we have the opportunity to get a stud that is far and away one of the best quarterbacks in the country, we'll make a move, we'll make an aggressive move. But for a guy like Malik Murphy, no, we'd rather ride with Emory Williams and continue to build this roster the right way, which to me makes sense, especially with how good I think this rushing attack will be in 2025, which you're probably going to be leaning on regardless of the quarterback. Offensive skill, that's been a big question too. You're losing a lot of really talented guys. Nykar got tripped up on a route and not even tripped up. It was more like you just got to be a little bit more physical in that route tree. JoJo Trader obviously catching a touchdown. The guy nobody's talking about, who I think might be one of, if not the best pass catchers / players on this offense next year, is Elijah Lofton. Dude's he's a football player. He's just a stud. He doesn't look like your traditional tight end, but he is a big physical body that can certainly get it done inline blocking, but is also a freaky dude when he's running routes. He's extremely smooth. I left that football game saying I feel pretty good about the pieces around the quarterback. Now for Mario Cristobal, I'd say, can we get the quarterback right? Whether that's Emory Williams, whether that's going to the transfer portal. Dylan, look, this team is moving in the right direction. I don't think there's any question you can have for that, but you got to make some significant changes, specifically on the defensive side of the football. I would guess that we're doing an episode tomorrow talking about defensive coordinator candidates. So maybe that'll be my nighttime reading tonight. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it again. To the Miami Hurricane fans, it's been a blast talking to this team in 2024. Excited for it in 2025. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.